If you're the new owner of a Cricut Maker machine and you're interested in learning how to cut heat transfer vinyl for beginners, then keep on watching. My name is Alex Vanover with DIY Alex, and I'm so glad that you're here. In this video series, I'm going to be telling you about all the features that make the Cricut Makers amazing machines. And in this episode specifically, we're going to focus on cutting heat transfer vinyl on the Cricut Maker. Now, throughout this series, I'm going to be featuring both the original Cricut Maker as well as the Cricut Maker 3. So make sure that you know which machine you have so you can pay attention to which features apply to your machine specifically. Now, let's get into it. When it comes to cutting heat transfer vinyl, also known as HTV, on the Cricut Maker, then pretty much any kind of HTV can be cut on your machine. In fact, I haven't run across a type of HTV, or some will call it iron-on, that can't be cut on the Cricut Maker. So that's the good news. But there are some tips that you may want to know along the way in Cricut Design Space that will help you make the most of your machine. The first step in Cricut Design Space is choosing an image. Now, if you have an image like this one where there are lots and lots of layers in the layers panel, there's one really important step that you must always take, and that is to attach all of your light colors. So let me show you what I mean. If you have an image like this that's grouped, that's going to help the design move together on the canvas, but once you click the green Make It button, those images are going to be all over the place and they're not going to be in the correct order. So it's important to select your image and choose Ungroup at the top of the Layers panel. Then you want to select all of the images that are the same color and attach those together. And this is important because your machine is going to group layers into separate mats based on images that are the same color. So that's why we always attach images that are like colors. So let me show you an example for this image. So in order to select multiple layers in the layers panel, I'm going to click on the layer first with my mouse. Then to select multiple layers, I'll hold down Shift on my keyboard, and I can actually go through and select multiple in the layers panel. Then once you have the images together that you want, you can select Attach, and those images will all cut together. And then you would repeat the same process for all of the black letters and shapes as well. Now, I'm not going to be using this image today. I just wanted to show you that example because it's going to be really important for you to know that as you navigate Cricut Design Space. Instead, we're going to choose a simple one color image for this project so that you can get some practice without making things too complicated. So once you have all of the proper layers attached and you have your design sized for your project, you can select the green Make It button. Then on the next screen, also called the Prepare screen, there are a couple of important changes that you'll want to make. The first is to mirror all of your mats that you're cutting with heat transfer vinyl. You are going to mirror your mats for HTV 99% of the time, unless there are some special cases, such as different types of pattern HTV that will specify not to mirror your designs. The next change that you could make depends on the maker machine that you have. If you have a Cricut Maker 3, your machine may ask if you want to cut with or without a cutting mat. And you can only cut without a mat if you're using smart materials. Smart materials are a specific type of iron-on created by Cricut that can be cut matless. So if that's the material that you're using, you can change the material load type from on a mat to without a mat. If you are not cutting smart materials, or if you have an original Cricut Maker, then you're always going to choose on a mat. Then once you've made your changes here in the prep screen, you can click the green Continue button to proceed to the Make It screen. Once your machine connects on the Make It screen, next it's time to choose your base material, or also known as a cut setting. The base materials are pre-installed cut settings in your Cricut machine that are programmed based on Cricut brand materials. So in order to access all of the base materials that your Cricut Maker is programmed to cut, you can click the green link here that says Browse All Materials. And once this menu opens up, you'll see that there are over 300 different materials that your Cricut Maker can cut. So let's talk about some of the most common cut settings when using HTV on a Maker. The most common cut setting that I use with HTV is the Everyday Iron-On cut setting. Remember that Cricut calls their HTV iron-on. So when you see that term, HTV and iron-on mean the exact same thing. And just like the name sounds, I use the Everyday Iron-On cut setting for pretty much all my everyday types of HTV. This could be Walla Cut Express, Caesar Easy Weed, Starcraft Soft Flex, and all different types of HTV like that. Another important cut setting to note is that I frequently use the glitter iron-on setting whenever I am cutting glitter HTV. Now, you may use other cut settings besides glitter iron-on and everyday iron-on, but these are by far the two most common cut settings that I use when it comes to cutting HTV on my maker. So I'll click the everyday iron-on cut setting to select it and then choose done. Keep in mind that you can also create your own cut settings or modify the pre-installed cut settings as well. If you want to learn more about that, then you can watch the video that I'll link up here in the corner of the screen, and I'll link it down in the description below. Once your cut setting is chosen, you can head over to your machine to finish your cut. Your Cricut Maker has a lot of different blades and tools that it can use, but for cutting HTV, you're going to want to use the silver fine point blade that comes pre-installed in your machine. Just make sure that the blade is sitting snugly in clamp B. The fine point blade looks like this, and you just want to ensure that this bottom edge is resting on clamp B as you close up the clamp. Remember how we checked the mirror button in Cricut Design Space? That's because we need to put the carrier sheet side down onto the cutting mat so that the back of the HTV is facing up at us. So you mirror the design so your machine can cut the design into the back side of the HTV with your carrier sheet in the front holding it all in place. If you're ever unsure about which side to put down on the mat, just peel a small corner of the HTV to determine which side is the carrier sheet so you can put it down on the cutting mat. So if I peeled it with my weeding tool, it would look just like this. And I can tell that this is the actual heat transfer vinyl itself, and this is the clear cutting sheet. So I know that this is the side that I need to put down on the cutting mat. For most heat transfer vinyl projects, I like to use the green standard grip cutting mat, but you can also use the light blue light grip cutting mat. Just be sure to place the shiny side or the carrier sheet side of the HTV down onto the cutting mat with the back side or the HTV facing up at you. Then once your HTV is on the mat, you can place it underneath the white guides and put a little bit of pressure at the bottom of the mat from your hand and click the flashing arrow button to load the HTV and the mat into your machine. If you have a Cricut Maker 3, then your machine will measure the mat just like it just did. And then when it's ready, the middle button will flash so you can press it to begin cutting. Once your HTV is finished cutting, then you can unload it from your machine. And then to remove the HTV from the mat, I like to flip it over and pull the mat away from the HTV like this. Now that our cut is finished, it's time to remove the excess HTV away from the cut so that we can reveal the final design. Now that we're done with the Cricut Maker part of this tutorial, let me show you how to apply this heat transfer vinyl. After your HTV is cut and weeded, the next step is to heat up your heat source to the proper time, temperature, and pressure settings for the type of HTV that you are using. And I'm going to be using a Cricut Express HTV, so I'm going to set my heat press to my favorite settings for Cricut Express, which is 280 degrees for 10 seconds at medium to firm pressure. And while my heat press is heating up, I want to take a moment to thank Heat Transfer Warehouse for sponsoring this video and partnering with me to bring you this information that I wish I had when I first got a Cricut Maker. And once our heat press is finished heating up, now we can get ready to press our shirt or other type of blank with HTV. So to begin, I'm going to pull out the drawer on my heat press. and place down my t-shirt or whatever blank you are using. I happen to be using a sweatshirt from Heat Transfer Warehouse for this project. Next, I want to place my HTV exactly centered and 3 inches below the collar of the shirt. So to do this, I like to use a t-shirt guide just to make sure that I measure correctly and that I have my HTV far enough away from the collar. So I'll place this on the shirt underneath the collar. And sometimes, since I have a really long design, I will place it a little bit closer than that 3 inches. You just want to make sure that it's not actually going to be right below the collar. Another trick to lining up your HTV properly is to take the non-sticky side of the HTV and fold the HTV in half. And then you can actually press a line in the carrier sheet down the center, and that's going to give you a really easy center line to follow that you can line up with the center line on the t-shirt guide. So now that I have that line, I'll just line it up with the center mark and press down the sticky side of my HTV carrier sheet onto my sweatshirt. Now, before I press, this is a really important step. I'm gonna remove my t-shirt guide, and then I'm actually gonna shift my t-shirt or my blank so that the collar and any seams are no longer on the platen. So the area that's being pressed on the lower platen here doesn't have any seams on it. That's going to ensure that I get really even pressure on my press. And I'm also going to use a Teflon sheet to cover my HTV design while I press. And if you don't have a Teflon sheet handy, you can also use a piece of parchment paper. But this is the best practice because it keeps any HTV from getting onto the upper platen of your heat press, because trust me, peeling or scraping that off is no fun. So I protect my press every time. So I'll place down my Teflon sheet and I'll push my drawer back in on my heat press. And then we'll press our design for 10 seconds. And when the timer goes off, I'll raise the upper platen of the heat press and then pull out the drawer so that I don't burn my fingers before removing the Teflon sheet and then peeling off the HTV carrier sheet. And once it peels off, your project is finished. Let's talk about some other things that you need to know about working with heat transfer vinyl. As soon as you press a shirt with HTV on it, you're welcome to wear it right away. But it is recommended that you wait at least 24 hours before you wash it. When choosing the material of your blanks or the things that you're going to press with HTV, I recommend sticking to cotton, polyester, and blends of cotton and polyester so that you know for sure that your HTV will work well with the material. What was the most helpful tip that you learned in this video? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you have a Cricut Maker, then you'll want to continue watching my Cricut Maker series so you can learn all of the best tips and tricks that I have so you can make the most of your Cricut Maker machine. And if we're not already connected on social media, then I would love to get to know you. So you can use the links down in the description below to find me on all of your favorite social media platforms. All the hearts.